She, you don't know, loves horror. In fact, she is currently producing a horror film of her own. She's finished the script. It's promising.
Vulgar, gruesome.
Vulgar, gruesome. Fortunately, this extended essay is not of the vulgar, gruesome kind.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone. So I did my extended essay on Alfred Hitchcock's influence in film. And just before we get started, I warn you guys that there is a couple spoiler alerts, so just please be aware. So before we get started, I'm going to show you guys. Oh no, never mind. Different slide. So why did I pick Alfred Hitchcock as my EE topic? Well, I love film. Like Mr. Blanton said, I love horror films, and I love Alfred Hitchcock. I love the movie Psycho. So I was completely inspired by it, and I immediately knew from the very beginning that I wanted to do my extended essay on Hitchcock and film. Also, last year we started the IB film course here. So not only did I have my love of film inspiring my extended essay, but now I had the background research that I could use to provide a better, deeper analysis of the film and of other films. And on top of that, my research process was really fun because I got to stay home and watch Netflix and consider it to be my actual homework. So right before we get started, I'm going to show you guys a 3-minute clip of the film that inspired this extended essay. And it's not gruesome or bloody. It's a little film. Why are they? It will get out. And the rest is just a part of the movie clips. But anyway, so that, you can turn the lights back on. That is a scene from Psycho, arguably one of Hitchcock's most famous films, and also probably one of the most dramatic death scenes of all time. You saw how she exaggerated that. So this scene inspired my extended essay, and I eventually created the research question: to what extent has the editing and filming techniques of Alfred Hitchcock in the film Psycho influenced the film industry? Unlike some of my other IB candidates, it was very easy for me to come up with a research question. I love Alfred Hitchcock, I love film, I love the influence of movies playing on film, old movies playing on the modern film industry, and I love Psycho, so I knew from the start I wanted to do it on this. I knew I wanted what I wanted to do, and I started my research process very, very early. So what is my EE about? My extended essay is a study of Alfred Hitchcock's films, specifically Psycho, and his editing techniques that he uses, and then a later comparison of how they are seen in modern films and how they have marked a generation of new films. The three main things that I talk about in my extended essay are his usage of sound, his different editing techniques that are used to build tension or to amplify a specific emotion, and character development. Those are the three big topics that I've talked a lot about in my extended essay. So the sources of my research process. My research process, like I said, I mean from the very beginning what I wanted to study. I love movies, I love Hitchcock, why not do an extended essay on it? My research was pretty much, it was a very long research process. In the process, I analyzed over 30 different films, read 6 different books about Alfred Hitchcock, his style, his techniques, and specifically his making of Psycho. And then I also included lesson plans and courses from film studies professors all around the United States and in Britain, and then also interviews from famous directors and them talking about how much Alfred Hitchcock has influenced them. However, and then eventually I got into an even longer, in-depth outline that was 3 pages long. Everything that I was going to say, every paragraph, everything. I had every piece of information in an outline. But then when it came to the writing of it, I procrastinated. Like many of my IB students, I waited until the day before and I wrote my extended essay in 8 hours. Not wise. So in conclusion, what I found out in my extended essay is more than what I imagined. I thought he had just influenced a couple things here and there, the famous Psycho song as you heard. I figured it was just a couple things. But in the end, what was my hypothesis, just a couple things, had grown significantly. He played a huge role in some of the biggest films that we've seen now. And everything he has ever done, you can see it countless times in movies from the 80s, movies from now, from famous directors such as Quentin Tarantino, M. Night Shyamalan, Martin Scorsese. All of them are famous users of Alfred Hitchcock's techniques. For example, I'm going to give you a couple films from the modern day and show you guys exactly how he's influenced it. How many of you have seen Inglourious Basterds by Quentin Tarantino? That's a pretty great film, so I would recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it. But also kind of gruesome, so beware. But in this scene, the bear juice scene, a little bit of context for you who haven't seen it. Sergeant Aldo Rain is about to call in the bear juice to kill off a Nazi officer for not revealing where other Nazi official camps are, etc. And in this scene where Sergeant Donnie Donowitz, or the Bear Jew, is coming in, he's swinging his baseball bat against the walls of a tunnel that we can't even see him in. And the music in that whole scene is building up the audience's tension because we know, based on previous information, that the Bear Jew, or Donnie Donowitz, is about to beat in a Nazi's head with a baseball bat. That's kind of gruesome for some of you more tame movie viewers, but it really is a very intense scene. The music is great, the sound is great, and it's building up the tension in a way that not only is the characters terrified, but also the audience is sitting on the edge of their seats. Next example of editing techniques. The film The Gift that came out in 2015 was a great example of how Hitchcock's style of editing was used to build up tension. In this movie, the couple is being stalked by an old high school friend, and at this point in the movie, the character's dog has gone missing for a couple weeks now. And it's the middle of the night, and this wife wakes up hearing sounds coming from outside from her glass door. And she's walking down the hallway trying to figure out if it's the stalker, if it's her dog, if it's someone there to kill her. And no one, not even the audience, can see what's at the end of this tunnel. For a minute, this whole scene is building up just so we can await that single scare of what's behind the door. You see her expression constantly, you see the end of the hallway, and you're sitting on the edge of your seat. And then finally, for character development, Janet Leigh, who played Marion Crane in the clip that I showed you, was one of the biggest stars in the 1950s and 60s. Alfred Hitchcock did a phenomenal job at portraying her as going to be the lead protagonist of the film. And as soon as the audience comes in to watch the first 30 minutes of the film, the entire film is centralized around her character. She's in every shot, every scene. There's no moment that she isn't on camera. And then 30 minutes in that famous shower scene, she's killed off right at the beginning of the film, making the biggest plot twist that Alfred Hitchcock had done in a very long time. This is also seen in Wes Craven's Scream that came out in 1998. Drew Barrymore, who was one of the biggest stars, of the 90s is killed in the first 10 minutes as a victim to the famous Ghostface. She's on the cover of every poster. She's on the cover of the DVD. She's doing promotion for it. So Wes Craven builds up the audience thinking that the whole movie is going to be centralized around her and then kills her off swiftly. So the challenges with my extended essay was when I was a kind, little, innocent junior prior to the extended essay, I was sitting in here watching musical essays, and I noticed that there weren't really any arts extended essays. There was one on fashion, but I'm not really a fashion-y kind of person. I kind of like horror and murder movies like that, so I don't know how that could possibly help me. I saw all these extended essays on history, English, economics, so I never really got to see the seniors, the class that was supposed to be the leaders, really giving me help and giving me the example and the people who I could look up to for an extended essay. On top of that, a lot of my research was personal knowledge. Sure, I had the books, and I had all that research, and I had directors commenting on it, but they didn't really put it together. I had to watch all these films, study all these tactics that Alfred Hitchcock used, and put them together. It took me hours of research, days. My summer vacation was spent in my room, in a dark room, watching movies, hoping that I could see some sort of clip that was a lot like Alfred Hitchcock's. Also, the procrastination writing the paper, it was really bad. I'm not kidding. I was very prepared at the beginning, but then when it came down to sitting down and writing this 4,000-word essay, I procrastinated. I wrote it in 8 hours. Not the wisest idea. Juniors, please don't do that. And then also, it was a lot of emotional stress. When it came to the point that I realized the extended essay was no longer some far-off thing that I didn't have to worry about yet, I panicked. I freaked out. My parents were in the audience, and Mr. Blanton can vouch for me when I say I had no clue what I was doing. I had no clue what to write. I had no idea. And I was terrified. But looking back now, the extended essay is one of my favorite parts of the entire IB diploma program because it was something that I loved and I was inspired, and I want to go into the film industry one day and be able to work on this. So this was just kind of like the little bridge of my adulthood. I say adulthood in quotations because... And then my advice to the juniors, for your extended essay, you really, really want to find something you're passionate about. I know I talked about this in my extended essay presentation, and I know all the other seniors have talked about this, but you really want to find something you love because 4,000 words can be really long or really short. And if it's going to be really short for you, if you find something that you really are passionate about, because it is an incredible experience. You learn so much about something you love. And then on top of that, you want to find a supervisor who knows what he's talking about. Mr. Blanton, who's my supervisor, he's the IB film teacher, and he can vouch for me when I say I came to him with every question. What kind of shot is this? What's the specific name? What other things do you know that I could possibly connect? All these sort of things. I asked him for so much advice, and it paid off in the end. Also, along the lines of procrastination, get started early. The research really does take a lot of time, especially when you're doing film. I spent so much time watching movies and reading books. So you really want to start early, you want to start thinking of ideas as soon as you can. Also, like I said on the lines of emotional stress, know that you are not alone. I know that you are not the only one in this. You have tons of other IB diploma students who will be there to help you and will help you get your head in the game and tell you to sit down and write it. Plus, you have your supervisor who will be there for you most of the time. And then you have your IB, and then you have your IB coordinator, Ms. Charles, who really will be there to smack reality into you and at the same time give you a warming hug. Oh, and also my final point is you want to never stop editing. Over the past couple of months since April when the first draft was due, I probably edited my extended essay 2 or 3 times a week. I continuously work to improve it. I want to get the highest grades. So never stop improving it because you never know how one sentence, how one paragraph could change your grade from a C to a B, a D to an A.
You ready for some questions? Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah,
Perfect time. Take you off because I'm afraid of you. You get a knife in your hand.
I don't have a knife in my
No,
head.
no.
I hired my actors to do that.
What's that? Other people go first. Mr. Costas.
I want to go last.
gonna go last.
Someone go first.
Okay, so Emily, I'm really happy that you did this because I know how passionate you are about movies, and I also share that interest with you, especially Hitchcock and just film history in general. So I was really happy to read this, and I was really impressed with the ideas that you presented in the paper. And I think I agree with everything in the paper except for when you said Scorsese's best film was The Wolf of Wall Street. But that's a conversation for another time.
As it was not.
Arguably.
So my question is the idea of the director as auteur. There's something called auteur theory that you may have come across in your research or in IB film. The idea that the director is so important and so substantial, their influence on the film is so great that they should be considered the author of the work. Just to what extent do you think that Hitchcock is either an important auteur compared to some of the greats that you mentioned in your paper, like Scorsese or Spielberg or maybe somebody like Kubrick, or even possibly do you see him as the ultimate auteur and that's why you are interested in him? So just speak about the idea of Hitchcock as auteur.
Well, I'm pretty biased because I really love Hitchcock films. He's my favorite director of all time. But I think like the thing that kind of set off, like the thing that kind of pushed the boundary to call him my favorite director is really the work that he did with Psycho, because like I read this book called Alfred Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho, and they actually in fact made a movie off of it, so look it up, guys. But it was kind of the fact that he continued to push the boundaries that no other director at that time had really done before. If you read the book, you learn all about the fact that the film was almost never produced. He had to use a lot of his own money that he made to make the film because the studio wouldn't make a film that gruesome and that like terrorizing. In fact, they had to cut out a lot of the nudity, they had to cut out a lot of the gore because it was so intense. And in fact, it left not only the audiences terrified, especially in that generation, but fun fact, Janet Leigh couldn't shower with her door closed for 5 to 10 years because of it. She was so scarred by it. But the fact that he really pushed the boundaries so much that he wanted a film like this to be made, and now we look back on it as one of the greatest horror films of all time. I think it's the fact, that's the thing that sets him apart from the directors that we see now, Kubrick, Spielberg, is that he pushed it so far that he was willing to lose his reputation for all the other films that he made just to get this film produced.
So the answer, just to answer his question as Hitchcock has portrayed, because you actually bring up Psycho it's Hitchcock's film, right? It's like when you think of Psycho, it's like he didn't write the story.
He wrote, Robert Bloch was the original author that came out of it.
Right, so that's the question. I mean, when you would think of Hitchcock and his films, I mean, could you consider him as an auteur because of his film style and his...
So
That's the
you
question.
want to speak
That's
on
the
that?
question. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess because I feel like there wasn't as many restrictions on books as there were back then. There were still really darker books at that time, but I feel like no one ever put it onto screen. And Hitchcock already had such a renowned name at that time. He had big films, Vertigo, North by Northwest, Dial M for Murder. He had all these really, really big box office films, and he was already considered to be one of the best directors of that time. And even though it wasn't technically his work, he's the one who really made it popular. I was looking back on like the reviews of the books and that sort of stuff. It wasn't, the selling of the book didn't really blast off until Alfred Hitchcock made the film. Like I don't know if that makes sense. He's the one who really pushed the book to be sold more, and he's picked it up at a bookstore just for a light read, and then he wanted to make it into the film. So when people look back at it, they see it as Alfred Hitchcock's thing, and although it came from a book, I think he's the one who really he really popularized that theme of murder in the U.S.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so Emily, I love AEE. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of the panel. I had a blast reading it. It's a topic that I really love. And I think that you're a wonderful presenter. I think you did really well, a great presentation. So, one question that hit me right away, and you mentioned that in the abstract and in the beginning of your presentation, is that you took into account a lot of movies, right? But your research question is focused on cycle, right? So it reads, to what extent has the editing and filming techniques of Alfred Hitchcock in the film cycle influenced the film industry? However, you mentioned a lot of techniques used in other films and other movies, and also movies that were influenced not by cycle, but techniques used in those different movies from Hitchcock, right? So I wonder if you think that you strayed a little bit from your research question, and that do you think that you departed from the research question? And if you did, do you think that maybe it would be adequate to change from the specific film cycle to his work as a whole? And I say that because of my physics background, right?
Yeah.
In an EE or IA for physics, you wouldn't be allowed to stray that far away from the research question. So I know that maybe not, it doesn't apply to film.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I actually have thought of that prior to you mentioning this. But I made sure when I started, because I realized that when I was going over it actually a couple of nights ago, but I wanted to make sure that everything that I had was involved in the film. Every cut that I mentioned, that sort of thing, it was all mentioned in the film. However, it wasn't the first time that Hitchcock used it, but just as a question generally for the audience, have you guys seen another Hitchcock film besides Psycho?
Yes.
Yes.
Which one?
Oh.
Other than the films, there is really
No, but I'm part of the audience too.
But how many of you guys have heard of Hitchcock because of his work with Psycho? Like, is that the film that like it really made you like a parent of that? There's a couple nods. So I feel like the reason why I stated specifically Psycho is because that is arguably his most famous film, and that's what he's best known for. And yes, I talk about the fact that there are cuts in different films, but I'm trying to focus it more. I'm in the process of editing that.
All right. How are you doing this? Is it going around, or do I ask?
Well, I think because we're asking questions right now, right? I think Marlo's going to save for suggestions. So I have. You have another question?
Yes, I do. So I think that the parallel between the bear Jew and the sound and the effects and cycle in the shower scene, I think that was a highlight in your EE. Love that. I think it's by far the best part of it. And you also mentioned his casting techniques, directing, editing, but you don't mention lighting. And I feel like it's so important in his work, the attention that he gave to lighting. So should that be a part of your EE? Or is there a reason why you didn't mention it?
I just didn't really like. Well, it's because I kind of picked like specific things right before I started writing my essay that I wanted to focus on. And yes, lighting is a really big deal, but I feel like lighting plays a really big role in all horror films, even prior to his. Through my film independent study, I saw that lighting was used even before Hitchcock was even starting directing. I watched a film from 1922 that had a lot to do with lighting. So I wanted to focus on things that really I don't know how to phrase this, that he really popularized.
Yes, he pioneered. So you're saying that you didn't pioneer maybe the lighting effects, but
yeah, I feel like he did a lot with it. However, like compared to like other horror films that I've seen from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, 50s even, I feel like lighting wasn't as big of a thing specifically for him to revolutionize rather than things such as editing techniques and tone.
all right. So lastly, just two things, and this is basically about the structure of the text. I feel that sometimes you jump from the other movies and Psycho, and then at one paragraph or another, you're not quite sure when you start a paragraph that you're talking about either Psycho or the other movies. So I think that you should edit that, and maybe adding to the structure sections. So this part's going to be about casting, because you mentioned casting in two different parts of your text. Maybe you should group it, put it together so it's more structured. Sound as well, you mentioned it, you have a huge part, which is the bear, Jew, and shower scene, right? And then you mentioned it now and then. I think that you should group that together as well, directing. I felt like, the breakdown that you did in the shower scene with the sound, I felt like you could have done that with the scenes, the cutting of the scenes and the editing as well. So
Okay.
I missed that. And lastly, the last thing that bothered me a bit was that you mentioned a lot of movies that were influenced by Hitchcock, right? You have the Wolf of Wall Street, Django Unchained, Sixth Sense, but you can't just say that, oh, those movies were heavily influenced by Hitchcock, and you don't mention why or how,
Yeah.
and never again, because the structure of your text is like this: you have a sentence, and then you explain that sentence in the coming paragraph, right? But sometimes you just forget to do it. For instance, his work of camera angles and certain shots only did certain things. So very abstract. It begs for further explanation, exploration, right? And you feel like in the coming paragraph that's going to happen, but you don't talk about camera angles and you talk about the sound and star scene. So I feel like you have to work a little bit on that and make sure that every influence that you mentioned here, there is a why behind it, and you're telling whoever is reading it that, you know, that, oh, this is influence in this part because of that, you know? Yeah,
That's great observation. We'll move over to a suggestion.
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, I was going to, but you already know about that, so there's no point in me commenting on it right now. Actually, I was going to say a lot of what he was going to say about how some of your paragraphs, like the sound of the camera angles ones, look like they're going to lead up to something, but they don't. But one thing that you talk about, like you talk about character development and casting, and I'm wondering if those are like two separate things, because you talk about in your E how like Hitchcock creates these characters like the boy next door or the blonde who gets murdered, and I think and you have those examples, but how do oh my gosh, I can't form my words right now. But I don't remember what I said. But yeah, like I keep forgetting what I'm trying to say. It's very frustrating. But like I feel like you build up those, but then you build them up like they're the same thing. When I think that you could break them up, like casting being one kind of thing that you would change, and character development, like creating these stereotypes or ideas that are used in lots of different movies. I think those are separate ideas that you kind of rush over like each other and mix them together. That's all.
Throw it. Thanks,
What is this?
I was just going to say that I thought personally your paper was probably most enjoyable when you made direct comparisons between the filmmaking of Hitchcock and movies that he influenced, like Screaming and Glorious Bastards. So if you could do the same with the other ones that you mentioned, that would be great. And then the only other question that I had was the time period when it's released, 1960s, pretty important.
Go straight to history.
As far as what that meant, it's kind of like a watershed moment for the movie industry and what Hitchcock was able to do with this film, but also kind of in American history as well, because you're moving from the decade of the 1950s and think about what that was like to the decade of the 1960s and think about how dramatically different they were from each other. And maybe Hitchcock is symbolic of what's going on in larger society. You know, art reflects life as well, that sort of thing. So maybe there's something there for either future projects or you could
History class.
Did you get a sense of that, like the release date that you mentioned in the work, like maybe more significance to it? Did you get a sense of that when you were doing the research?
Well, my research was more, compared to my history IA, which is also on film, it wasn't more of like a historical view, it was more from like the analytical point from which cuts he chose to which tones he used to all that sort of thing. So the historical aspect, I feel like, wasn't as big of a part of my research as in comparison to the analytical part.
Something for future projects.
You got 1 minute. I'm just gonna I'm just curious about the title, Teaching America to Love Murder, because it didn't start with Hitchcock, right? I mean, he did some things different. Maybe it speaks to some of the changing of times or whatever. Just think about the title of that, or why you chose that. And move on. The other thing that I would just to legitimize some of the things include, you had mentioned that there were directors that had quotes that you could use that they said that they were influenced by Hitchcock or Psycho. I would believe this, not just a reservation.
Just a couple more suggestions. One that I would, a suggestion that I have for you and every other student here, is that when you read each paragraph, you should evaluate if it aligns with the research question, right? And then either change the question or change the paragraph. To be a little bit more formal in the text, but that's also coming from my physics background, maybe I'm wrong, to reduce the number of superlatives, right? And a common mistake for all students is that when you make a definitive statement, like viewers never grasp the reality of this film and how it made a transformation to Hollywood, you should have some background quote or source, something to back up this statement. And one last thing, I think that you could add Hitchcock's conservative political view. For instance, he thinks that the government should be small, it can't be trusted, right? That's why in so many of his movies, the cops only come at the end of the movie, right? And that influenced so many other movies that I think that it should come into play, especially in the cycle that happens, right? So yeah.
You are.